So cosine functions, we're going to talk about just a little bit first before we kind of move on. There's a couple of differences between cosine functions and sine functions. The sine functions, right, sinusoidal ones would be written like a sine b x minus h plus k. Cosine, very similar, right? A cosine b x minus h plus k. Really and truly, the only thing that's going to be different on this guy is your period's going to be the same. It's transferable. Okay. So we can actually write this down here in the middle if you want, or put this somewhere. Your A, your B, and K are the same. Okay. They're all the same. Doesn't really change anything, right? Like whenever I go to process this, max, min, AK, max, min, AK. That first process is not going to change. Okay. Now, the only thing that's different, in fact, I'll even write like B and period, B and period. That procedure is exactly the same, but herein lies the difference between them. So H, kind of the same thing, just starting at a different point. Sine functions start halfway and go like this. Let's just say that there, right? So they can either go there, they can either start by going up, or they can go down and then up. Let's try that again. Down and then up. Okay? So now cosine ones are a little different. I need your help on this one because each grade does things a little bit differently. I do want you to notice that this guy here is where A is positive and this is where A is negative. Because from H and K, it's going either down or up. And so that's HK. That's HK right there. Cosine's a little different. Okay. It either starts at the top and then goes down, or it starts at the bottom. Oh no. Starts at the bottom and then goes up. And let's reconnect there. Why do you gotta be like that? Pause this for a second while that reconnects. So the A value on this guy we said is going to actually be, in this case, positive. Your reasoning, Jackson, I wish I had that kind of recorded, was that if you look at a sinusoidal one, and I started here and then went down and then the full way up, well, that guy's a positive one, right? So the only thing I'll point out, and this is what one of the donkeys last year kind of had pointed out, was sine functions, A is positive when it goes up from the starting point. But the kids last year said, well, doesn't this kind of look like a parabola? And that's where A is positive and that's where A is negative for parabolas. So that's how they kind of aligned it in their head. Doesn't mean that that's going to make sense for you for cosine. But Jackson, your notion of because the sine one is positive, then this guy here should be positive, that works. Madison, if you look at it and think, well, cosine's just backwards, right? If it's going down, then A is positive. If it's going up, then A is negative. So if you want to say it's backwards, that works. If you want to look at it like a parabola, also works. Like it's whatever fits for your head. Okay. Is there anything you prefer more than other, or just maybe the backwards? Or yeah, okay. That's it in a nutshell. The only thing about this that's kind of weird is that I told you that the K, right, is the same for both of them. It's the middle line, right? It's whatever cuts right through the middle of it. That's always going to be K. Always going to be K. The H on this is kind of weird to wrap your brain around. That's the only part of cosine functions that I do not like. But in terms of decoding from word problems, oh my goodness, this is way easier. So if you can wrap your head around this, it's going to make life easier. H exists right here, right? So it's kind of odd to think about, but wherever I'm starting as an X value there, my H, perfect, okay? Starts right there. That's nice. The K, however, is still halfway through. So you're still starting at like a vertex, a starting point. It's just the starting point is in a different location. And your H and K aren't really connected anymore. That's the difference. H and K are in the exact same spot where I'm starting. H and K are kind of in two different places.
Lost.
That's nice. So H and K are in two different places. So that makes that a little harder to kind of wrap your head around. We're going to look at a bunch of examples here so that you can maybe sort of do some mental reasoning and stuff. But I wanted to start with just a general explanation of it first before you went to go and try and graph one of these guys. So I thought what I would do is have you guys like try them on your own really quick, just thinking about what the things we talked about, right? Knowing full well that, geez, I should have left more room on these guys. That I still want you to think about, right? Max, min, A, K, and then alternately like what is the period, what is B, what is H, and how I can find all of those things to go ahead and graph it. The first one's a little bit easier because like your x-axis, you can kind of make it whatever you want, and it's actually going to be real numbers. Over here, it's going to be annoying. It's going to be a mixture of that stuff, but we'll look at that later. Yeah. So essentially what you're going to do is, yeah, exactly it. Start by finding out like what your A value is. And so my A value in this case is 2, right? I don't really care if it's positive or negative. My K value is -1, okay? So if I find -1 right there, and my A value is 2, the max is basically -1 plus 2. So the max is going to be right there. The min is going to be -1 minus 2. So that's going to be right there. So none of that changed. The period they said was, oh, we don't know what it is. We know that the B is pi over 2. So we can figure out what the period is from that, right? 2 pi divided by pi over 2. You're just swapping things around. It's just going to equal 4. And then the H, it says, is +1. Okay? So on this guy here, I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the same thing up the sides, right? So if you're starting at 1 and -1, Jackson, and you write this guy in here, so 1 and -1. For a cosine guy, remember, so we're more concerned, this is why it's weird to kind of wrap your head around it. The H is -1. So I might, or it's +1.
I got the point right of where it is, but my question is, do I still have to put like the middle guy?
Oh, yeah.
Period's 4 across. So I'm putting like a point at 2.
Yeah, I would put one halfway. And that's pretty well, these ones are almost easier to graph in that case because really you just need 3 points. The other one we were doing like a bunch of other sequences, which you can do, but ideally 1, 2, 3, 4 units away. So if I just bracket it that way, this is where I'm starting, this is where I'm ending. Was A positive? Okay, A is positive. So that's the one that's smiling, right? It's the one that's going beep. So then starting up here, the K is still in the middle, ending down there. So that's cosine functions, right? With A being positive, I'm going to start right up there because the K being -1 is not where I start the function.
Yeah.
I start wherever H is, right? At the maximum. You're going to start drawing from the maximum. So you kind of got to wrap your head around the fact that, like, pretty well just use K to draw the middle line and then don't think about it again like we normally do, right? And then I'm going to go middle of that. And you can kind of go in between and go in between if you want. And then draw it like that if you wish. Yeah.
So if a function is a positive, you're starting at the maximum, but if it's a negative, you start at the minimum.
I really like that description. That is way, way too good. I'm going to go back here and actually say that. So if A is positive, it goes from max to max. If A is negative, we go from min to min. That is way better. You guys are better at this than I am.
We were just better than once.
Not that hard. Just kidding. Sorry, grad class of 2022. You guys are great. Love you. 23. Whatever. What year is it? What year is it? They suck, too. I should stop recording that. Just kind of get you halfway on it. We'll do the still max, min, A, K, and then we're going to need to figure out what the period is from the B and also identify what the H is. So really weird. Now all of a sudden we're going to have to use radian measurements for our x-axis. We can still use numbers. We can still use integers as our label for our y-axis. But on this guy here, I'm going to say pi over 2 is going to be my h value. And in fact, I'm going to write negative pi over 2. So just notice that's a plus.
Once you go down, which you can go down.
So we're going to, with negative 2, we're going to start at the minimum and go up. And if the midline, so if k is 2, right?
Oh, it's H. Yeah.
So I'm always good. I really honestly feel like if you start at whatever k is and then put that in there, k is equal to 2, k is equal to 2. And then forget about k in the rest of the graphing, then you're going to do yourself a lot of favors because it's just so weird. The maximum and minimum of this guy are going to be derived from the value of A. A is negative 2. I still want you to know that the maximum is 2 above the K and the minimum is 2 below the K. The negative 2 is just telling me whether or not I have a cosine that looks like Mr. Greer or one that looks like Mr. Sweezy when a kid hurts himself. Smiling.
Like Kent or Menzies.
Right. Okay, very good.
Menzies.
Right. Yeah. Recording. Moving on. Moving on. I'll have to edit that out. So on this guy here, the maximum is still going to be 2 plus 2. It's equal to 4, right? It doesn't matter that it said negative. It's just where is K? How many units is 2? It's 2. And then minimum is going to be 2 minus 2, giving me 0. So that's going to be my floor. That's going to be my ceiling right there. Okay? The only thing this negative tells me is that I'm starting at the actual minimum. So you can even write that. Start at min. I'm going to write minimum there. Start at max. Really like that. Right? Just to identify what the negative's doing. Okay?
Do I need to hold the thing on my cheat sheet for cosine?
Like I would just have that one blank sheet thing that I put up there. I might take a screenshot of that and then throw it on the teams there. And then again, I'll save this when we're done with it and post this as well. The B on this guy, right, is 2. So our period is 2 pi over 2 or just pi. Now, this is the thing that had people kind of a little bit bothered on the last time we did this. Just think of it in terms of like we're cutting things into 4s. There's always going to be like 4 discrete sections. 1, as you see on the previous one, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So if I am dealing with a period of pi, then the units I'm going to break it into are like quarters, right? But I'm not starting at that guy there, right? My start is the h of negative pi over 2. And so if you added a quarter pi to negative half a pi, what would you end up with? And in fact, how about I phrase it this way a little bit better? If you started at negative 0.5 and you were moving by like 0.25, closer to 0 and beyond, where would you be at next? Where would you be at next if you're adding, I'm at negative 0.5 and I'm adding 0.5, or I'm adding 3 pi over 4. Perfect. Yeah. So like 0.75 pi. Or again, so that's if you're going, well, that'd be going if you're going this way, because we're going closer to the 0. So you're right. If I wanted to go that way, right, I'd be getting 3 pi over negative 3 pi, but we're in the negative. So we're going to end up at negative pi over 4, and then 0, and then pi over 4, right? Weird. But my start point, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 units after it. That's how I'm going to label this axis here. So negative pi over 2, negative pi over 4, 0, pi over 4, pi over 2, and then we can graph it from there. Yeah. Just forget about the pi and try and think about it like it's fractions, or even convert it to decimals in your head. Hopefully that'll make it easier when you're kind of working in this world.
So dumb. Just make it normal. Friggin' numbers.
Well, it would be like, reason why we do it this way is it's the interchangeable nature of what the x-axis can be. The other way to look at it would be you would have degrees in the bottom.
Wait, are we gonna deal with that in like a word problem?
No, you won't be graphing it out this way. This is more just like a general understanding of how radians are kind of calculated. And so
Okay.
when you have a b value of an integer, right, then your period is going to be measured in radians. So if you had another question like this and you had a b value of 2 and you're over in Ontario, your period length is going to be measured in like degrees.
That'd be better.
It might be, but it's just you still have to be able to encounter both. You still have to be able to understand radians. It's a skill set that they're trying to impart. So instead of, I think in the Ontario they do like radians and degrees. We just strictly go, okay, well, they did degrees when we were working with triangles and trig and SOHCAHTOA last year, so they know how to use that button on their calculator. In grade 11, we're just going to strictly look at how to use radians. And the annoying part of it is it's like interchangeable depending upon whether or not your b is written as a radian or your b is written as a number. If b and
These
h,
radian periods is it period as an integer?
well, b will be, if b, sorry, I'll put it this way, if b is written as a radian, then your graph is just going to be nice integers. But if b is written as an integer, then you're going to have to be working with radians as an x-axis label, which makes it more complicated.
So all this just so stupid people don't build bridges.
All this right here. So again, I'll finish this guy up and then suggest that on this guy here, we're going to start. Ken had mentioned we now know that a negative means we're starting at the minimum. I don't care about k anymore. I just care about h. So h is me. I'm going to start, so we can even go further. I'll write this out clear. Start at h and min for this guy. This guy was start at h and maximum. And this is because a is positive, and this is because a is negative. So, hello.
Here's a delivery for you, Mr. Sweezy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
The maximum is going to be in the middle, and then we can kind of fill in the rest of this guy here. Okay. So that would be sketching out that guy right there. So rather complicated, but just a way to kind of get your head to wrap around the cosine function stuff. We'll take a look at this one multiple choice one that you can try and sort of figure out on your own. And then, go from there. Beep. So just as like a final walkthrough on this guy, I already did this, should have been recording. We selected C on this guy here. We could have chosen a number one of these. What I have included is like why we've rejected these things. If it was sine, this guy could have been it. A value could have been it. I started right there at that 2 pi. The only problem is it's going downhill from this point of h. So that would mean that the a value would have to be negative in order for that one to work. Same thing with d. If I chose to start looking right there at 3 pi, it's starting at a minimum. Well, I know when a function starts at a minimum and it's cosine, the a value should be negative and it's not, so I reject it. So the one I am going to accept is, I see that for c, the h value is pi, which I can use that. It's starting at a maximum, so the a should be a positive 2. I mean, they're all positive 2 in this case. I can look from the graph, the amplitude, or a, should be 2. That works. The last kind of confirmation would be figuring out from my period of 4 pi, which you can either look at by going, because whether it's sine or cosine, when it goes from halfway to halfway, that distance there is still one cycle. That's still a period. If you don't like that, and when you're working with cosine, you'd rather like complete it, then at least you'll know that halfway was 2 pi. So the full distance would be double that, or 4 pi. Either would be acceptable. 2 pi divided by 4 pi will give me my b, 1 over 2. So C is our answer there. Okay. I'll let you try this one on your own again as well. Then we'll wrap up for the day and then get the C1s out and rolling. But this will be the last guy that we kind of think about. Maybe these last two. Right? Okay. Ask that again.
The A is negative 3, not 3.
A is negative 3, but so amplitude is defined as like the absolute value of like A. Kind of annoying, right? Like if I said, tell me what the A of this function is, fine, yeah. Amplitude is specifically just looking at from K to its maximum or from K to its minimum. What is that distance? So the absolute value of that. But you're totally right. Like when I go to input it into the actual rule, I'm going to say negative 3. A is negative 3.
So just don't worry about
But the actual term amplitude is specifically referring to absolute value of A. So it doesn't care whether it's negative or positive. It's just, and the reason why they use the word amplitude versus A, so if A is negative 3, then amplitude
So is
is
it
3. Because the idea is, right? Because the idea would be, we really want the amplitude just to tell us where is the max and the min on this guy here. Okay? So I'm going to be looking at 2 and negative 2 first. So like my h and k is negative 2, negative 2. So all that means is, right, the k value is negative 2 for this guy. Okay? So it's like they're all written as that, so that's pretty easy. Now, it's saying the h value in this is negative 2. Let's take a look at that right now. Okay? So at a x value of negative 2 for this function, am I at either a maximum or a minimum? No, I'm halfway. One of these might work if this was a sine function because it's starting halfway, but this will not work as a cosine function because it's neither starting at a maximum or a minimum.
So it can't be C or D, right?
Well, it can't be A or B right off the bat from what we just did.
Yeah, well, C or D, it's not starting at +1.
No, it's not +1. It's negative 1. There's a maximum. So this guy is negative 1 and negative 2.
Isn't H the starting point?
H is the starting point. So if I go now look at negative 1, am I at a maximum or a minimum? I'm at a maximum. So that's going to be a cosine one. It's weird. We're starting at a maximum for an H. The K is still in the middle, but the H, Jackson. Okay, so it's got, don't blame Jeremy. So on this guy here, right, the A and the B we are going to reject outright because those would be more for sine functions. The one next thing that I would look at, because I don't want to have to look at whether or not figuring out period in B if I don't have to and do the whole 2 pi nonsense. I would look at now, is there another difference? And yes, the A value on these guys is different between the two. So if I'm starting at a maximum, should it be positive? Should be positive. So that's got to be the answer because it can't be that guy. Yeah.
So that's the first thing I did to narrow it down. Let's get rid of the negative ones.
Yeah. So then you don't, for this guy, you don't even have to do the B value and the period, strictly because we rejected these two based on the fact that they weren't starting at a place that would work for a cosine function. And we rejected the bottom one because I started at the maximum, so it can't be a negative A value. And then the last thing I'll go over is just the, for these guys here, what's the maximum? Well, I'm still always just going to write this out just to make my life easier. A is -3. The max is going to be 0 plus 3, so 3. 0 minus 3. The K is going to be 0. The period can be derived from 2 pi over 2 equal to pi. B value is equal to 2. H value is equal to positive pi over 2. Now, maximum being 3, that checks out. We're looking for what's false. The amplitude is an absolute value, okay? So the fact that it says 3, and I know that it's the A value is a -3, I don't really care about that negative. I just care about the absolute value of it. So I can say that this guy is true. The period is pi. I already did that. I can see that right off the bat. I can check that off. The last thing is phase shift, and you can write this underneath, is another word for H. Now, they've written it funny where they say it's pi over 2 units to the left. But this guy's not going to the left. Even though it says negative pi over 2, we always know that it's opposite. So actually, this phase shift is to the right. So that's the one that is going to be false. And that's it in a nutshell.